We strongly warn viewers to exercise caution before we start. The following is solely for entertainment and educational purposes. According to Inner City Press, this is the exact transcript of the federal courtroom testimony from Sean Diddy Combs' trial. We strongly suggest that viewers use their own judgment. What you're about to hear is based solely on sworn testimony from a federal court, presented just as it was recorded. Unfiltered, frightening, and highly revealing, Single Object has turned everything on its head in a trial that is already full of high stakes and close scrutiny. A witness didn't change the tide. It wasn't a dramatic cross-examination. It was something far more intimate and much more damaging. Deep amid the burned remnants of a Miami home, a property that suddenly caught fire just hours after a federal raid, detectives uncovered a shocking find. Behind a false wall, encased in a heat-warped metal safe, sat a leather-bound diary. The papers were scribbled and partially burned, so they were never meant to be seen. What lay inside that diary? Enough to make a federal judge's hands quiver. Enough to freeze a full courtroom into silence. And enough to send 3 significant public personalities fleeing the nation within hours of the final page being read aloud. This wasn't just another piece of evidence in the trial of Sean Diddy Combs. It was his voice, his words, a chronicle so thorough, so devastating, that federal prosecutors are calling it the most explosive document in modern entertainment history. The last entry, dated the day before his arrest, went beyond confession. It plotted a whole network, a clandestine alliance of influences in music, politics, and law enforcement. As the judge read those lines aloud, the mask fell away. Diddy's confident exterior broke. His hands grasped the table. His eyes expanded in amazement. And for the first time since this tale began, he appeared genuinely terrified. But what precisely did that final entry say? What names were included in what prosecutors now call the protection circle? And why did the judge promptly shut down all recording devices before turning to the last page? This isn't merely the narrative of a man on trial. It's the crumbling of an empire, one founded not only on celebrity, but on deception, fear, and secrets that were never supposed to be exposed. It begins with a diary. And if the contents are to be believed, it might end with the entertainment business transformed forever. As we bring you this unfolding narrative in full, unedited detail, we move you now to the Manhattan Federal Courthouse, where one of the most astonishing occurrences in modern legal history just transpired. The morning began like any other in court. Lawyers were quietly organizing their notes. The public gallery filled with journalists and watchers. And at the front, Sean Combs sat beside his legal team, calm, cool, at least on the surface. Then, the prosecution asked for permission to introduce fresh evidence. A murmur pervaded the room. 2 FBI officers entered the courtroom pushing a burned, blackened safe on a dolly. Its metal warped from significant fire damage. It had been retrieved from a secret room in Diddy's house, right before the property was consumed in flames. Prosecutors implied the timing was no mistake. The fire, they argued, was likely staged to destroy any secrets the estate held. But this specific safe? It had already been confiscated. And inside was the last thing everyone anticipated: a diary. Not typed, not transcribed, but handwritten, in the unmistakable pen of Sean Combs himself. The lead prosecutor's voice was firm as he addressed the court. "This journal spans more than 20 years, he remarked. It details names, dates, locations, and acts that directly relate to the charges." A frightening quiet swept over the room. Diddy's face transformed. Perplexity giving way to something darker. Terror. His lead attorney instantly objected, alleging the diary hadn't been provided during discovery. But the prosecution emphasized, the diary had only just concluded forensic processing that same morning. The judge authorized its introduction. A court officer went up with a hefty, leather-bound book, edges still scorched from burning. The judge flipped over its pages calmly at first. His brows wrinkled, his lips stiffened, and then, without warning, he took a decision that no one saw coming. He would read chunks of the diary aloud. But certain identities, he said, will be redacted, at least for now, as they connected to active investigations. Tension in the courtroom swelled like static. Reporters leaned forward, pens ready. The gallery fell to a stillness. Diddy, now visibly sweating, leaned forward. His attorney reached out, placing a comforting touch on his arm. The judge adjusted his glasses and began to read. The entries began decades ago, chronicling a journey not just of artistic ambition but of strategic control. What sounded at first like ramblings from a budding music entrepreneur soon revealed something more sinister. A meticulous system of surveillance, manipulation, and power building. The early pages laid it all naked. Diddy, in his own words, detailed how he picked susceptible artists and exploited their secrets. He wrote of freak-off parties where visitors were discreetly recorded in compromising activities. Tapes that he later utilized as insurance. This wasn't only about safeguarding a career. It was about amassing leverage. A safety net created from blackmail, secrets, and carefully nurtured alliances. According to the judge, as he read through the journal, the tone of the entries evolved over time. What began as enthusiastic aspiration slowly evolved into cool, clinical planning. The papers portrayed a man who no longer saw humans, only pawns. And every step he did was geared to extend influence, tighten control, and safeguard his empire. But this was merely the beginning. The most catastrophic news still lied ahead, and the next few pages would leave everyone in that courtroom changed forever. Stay with us. What comes next may be the most startling confession ever heard in a federal trial. As the judge turned each page, the courtroom felt heavier. Like every word read from that charred diary was unraveling the finely braided threads of a man long viewed as untouchable. Within those pages, prosecutors unearthed what they called a manual of control. A network of loyalty, secrecy, and compulsion. There were names, many. Some listed as devoted operators who implemented orders without hesitation. Others identified with vulnerabilities, what Diddy himself referred to as pressure points. These were people who fought his rule, only to be met with manipulation and threats. One unsettling portion laid forth a chilling tactic. Find young, bright potential. Strip away their support systems. Make them financially dependent. Then use their success as a leash. Careers became tools of control. Compliance bought not with threats, but with opportunity and fear of losing it. A single sentence repeated throughout the book with bleak consistency. Once they're in the family, they never leave the family. According to prosecutors, these remarks coincided strangely with past testimonies. Witnesses who reported feeling ensnared in Diddy's orbit. Leaving wasn't just professional suicide, they said. It could be life-threatening. FBI forensic specialists later confirmed the diary's authenticity. Every ink stroke, every dated paper, matched Diddy's handwriting and materials from the time. Not only was the diary his, it had clearly been marked for destruction. The fire, they said, wasn't simply about property. It was an attempt to erase history. That attempt failed. What made this diary so incendiary wasn't just its content. It was how it connected the dots. Disparate parts of the puzzle, scattered instances, cryptic rumors, suddenly established a pattern. And all of it, now brought together by Diddy's own words. As the judge resumed his review aloud, the courtroom's atmosphere worsened. Reporters stopped scribbling. Spectators leaned in. Diddy's attorneys crowded together, apparently disturbed, muttering and passing urgent notes. One lawyer stood, asking a respite. But the judge, eyes riveted on the final page, refused the motion. "We will proceed with the final entry," he added confidently. Then, he glanced to the last scrawled words. A page dated March 24, 2025, just one day before the arrest that took Diddy to this courtroom. You could hear a pin drop. "I will read it verbatim," the judge announced, with names redacted where necessary due to ongoing investigations. He cleared his throat and began. "Meeting with redacted. Didn't go as planned. The heat's too much. The feds aren't stopping now, not after all I've done for him. All the campaigns I financed, the parties I gave. Now he's pretending we're strangers. Loyalty means nothing anymore." The words echoed off the wood-paneled walls. "Got word that redacted is talking. 15 years I kept her relevant. Now she wants immunity. She was there. Miami. The Hamptons. She knows everything. Now she's flipping. The judge's voice never faltered. Told redacted to wipe the systems. Move the cash to the offshore accounts. That drive, the one containing the tapes, can't surface. Too many faces. Too many individuals with too much to lose. If this diary is ever found, which it won't be, let me make this clear. I built this empire. I made stars. I built kings and queens. They owe me everything. The system protects people like us. Cops, judges, prosecutors, they've all gone to the parties. They've all tasted the perks. They can't touch me without revealing themselves. And then came the threat. Not hidden, not veiled, but plainly written. If this goes bad, the dead man's switch gets activated. The list is in the secondary location. 43 names. Videos for each. Financial records. Messages. All of it. That's the insurance. That's why I've survived this long. Because if I go down, they all go down with me. As the judge reached the final line, his hands rested on the open book. He looked up. Sean Combs sat totally still. The color had drained from his face. His attorney sat with his head in his hands. Then the judge spoke. The entry continues with a list of individuals. For now, these names will stay sealed. But let the record reflect. Many are significant leaders in politics, entertainment, and law enforcement. The lead prosecutor stood. Your Honor, we move to submit the diary as Exhibit 47 and request immediate revocation of bail. This entry reveals not only guilt, but the clear desire to tamper with evidence and intimidate witnesses. Before the judge could react, mayhem erupted. Diddy, once poised, once confident, suddenly leaped across the table toward the diary. His face twisted in fright and hatred. That's not mine, he shouted. They're setting me up. Court-martials swarmed him. He fought back, still roaring, while the courtroom exploded into yells and gasps. Order! Order in the court! The judge yelled, pounding his gavel repeatedly. When calm restored, the judge glanced directly at the defendant. In light of this outburst and the contents of this evidence, bail is hereby revoked. The defendant will stay in federal detention for the duration of this trial. The moment represented a collapse, not just of bail, but of the facade Diddy had maintained for weeks. He was brought away in restraints. The courthouse doors flung wide as reporters ran into the street to relay the breaking headline. The diary had detonated the case. After a short recess, the court reconvened. The next witness stepped forward. FBI Special Agent Melissa Rodriguez, whose task was to explain what the journal revealed, and what might follow next. What Agent Rodriguez would divulge on the stand would extend the controversy even further, and demonstrate just how wide this network might stretch. The storm was only beginning. Agent Melissa Rodriguez entered the stand with the calm certainty of someone holding the missing piece to a large puzzle. What made the diary so damning, she argued, wasn't simply its existence, but what it confirmed. A deeply organized system of control, one shockingly congruent with what victims had been reporting for years. For prosecutors, it was no longer just testimony against Sean Combs. Now they had his own words, diary entries that, piece by piece, describe how he retained power not by happenstance, but by purposeful design. According to Rodriguez, the diary lay out a system rooted in surveillance, manipulation, and carefully maintained allegiance. Diddy had called it himself, the Circle, a tightly knit network of insiders, trusted aides, enforcers, and handlers, tasked with guaranteeing allegiance, stifling criticism, and handling secrets. The entries were ruthlessly systematic. There were references to recording devices set in restrooms and bedrooms. Hidden eyes in places where guests would feel most unguarded. Rodriguez stated how the diary indicated a dangerous pattern. Possible musicians or business partners were invited to what appeared to be ordinary industry functions, only to be whisked into secret rooms. There they were secretly recorded. Footage later weaponized if those victims ever tried to leave or speak out. A section named simply Insurance cataloged names, compromising materials, and explicit instructions on when and how to employ them. It wasn't simply blackmail, it was psychological entrapment. One scary entry from 2018 read, Reminded redacted about the Hampton footage. Suddenly, she's considerably more agreeable with the contract terms. Agent Rodriguez pointed out that this coincided precisely with witness 14's prior testimony, how she was coerced into an exploitative contract after being threatened with the release of private material. But the diary didn't stop there. IT identified a network of assets used as operating hubs, many obtained through dummy corporations. These residences were separated into clean spaces, safe zones without surveillance, and wired zones, rigged with hidden cameras and mics. They were known to as safe houses, though in actuality, they were anything but safe for the people within them. Interwoven amongst the manipulation and extortion were pages filled with detailed financial notes. Rodriguez said that Diddy maintained what he called silence maintenance. These were monthly payments offered to those who had watched or experienced what transpired in those underground rooms. Payments aimed not only to purchase silence, but to foster dependency. IT wasn't about hush money. It was about control. These people couldn't afford to break ties, because Diddy had made sure they relied on him financially. The FBI had identified numerous of the payments, exact figures matched dates, and verified them against real-world transfers found throughout the inquiry. All the while, the man at the center of it all sat frozen. Sean Combs, once a master of the courtroom's gaze, now stared blankly at the table. His eyes darted constantly toward the evidence, his attorneys, the exits. The panic wasn't veiled anymore. By the time Rodriguez ended her testimony, the diary had become more than evidence. It had become the spine of the case. It linked everything: the witness accounts, the cash routes, the concealed footage. It exposes not just a man, but a whole mechanism of exploitation. But the courtroom wasn't done. A name was called, one no one had expected: Jason Mitchell, a former chief of security for Sean Combs. He stepped into the witness box with the sluggish, careful intensity of someone who had carried secrets for far too long. He hadn't been on the prosecution's first list. But after hearing of the diary's discovery, he'd stepped forward on his own. "I was in charge of security at Mr. Combs' properties," Mitchell continued. But that didn't just mean protecting him from outsiders. It meant preserving what transpired inside. His statement stunned the courtroom. Mitchell validated practically every operational detail recorded in the diary. Surveillance gadgets weren't just rumored, they were genuine. And he'd installed many of them himself. Bedrooms, meeting spaces, and toilets were the priority. Locations where targets were most relaxed, most susceptible. There was even a protocol, he explained. When a high-value target, a celebrity, producer, or exec, arrived, workers would occasionally pretend that their room had a plumbing issue. They'd be relocated into another suite, one outfitted with concealed cameras. What happened behind those walls was then examined, catalogued, and preserved. Staff called the archive the library. Mitchell said it was kept technologically private, available only to Combs and a few select insiders. Sometimes, he added, Mr. Combs would review the footage himself, make notes: who could be used, who needed careful handling, who was a threat. The defense objected again and again, trying to shatter Mitchell's credibility. But each time, the judge reminded the court, Mitchell's account directly corroborated the diary's contents. Then came the bombshell that brought audible gasps from the gallery. Mitchell was the one who installed the very safe that housed the journal. In 2017, he continued, Mr. Combs had me build it into the wall of the Miami mansion, hidden behind shelving, reinforced, custom-coded. When asked what the safe was for, Mitchell didn't hesitate. He told me it was for documents that could burn the whole industry down if they ever got out. He termed it his insurance policy. The prosecution showed him images of the burned safe discovered after the fire. Mitchell verified it was his installation, pointing out special security elements he had personally placed. The prosecutor pressed further. Did Mr. Combs ever tell you what to do if something happened to him? Yes, Mitchell said. He said if he ever disappeared or was taken down, I was to retrieve the contents and give them to a specific attorney. He said the files made sure nobody could cross him without paying the price. This declaration destroyed the last of Diddy's composure. He leaned closer, his attorney, whispering desperately. Panic had taken full hold. Then Mitchell halted. His voice sank. He indicated that he eventually left the position. Not over money, not over war, but because the line had been crossed too many times. In late 2019, he remarked, there was a young artist, barely 20. I saw as Mr. Combs isolated them, cut them off from their group, established a dependency, and then, he paused, took a big breath, and stared at the floor. I saw the aftermath. The courtroom didn't move. The silence wasn't simply somber, it was oppressive. Next, what the prosecution revealed following Mitchell's testimony surprised even the most seasoned legal observers, and opened the door to a potential racketeering allegation that might reshape the entire trial. Stay tuned. The empire isn't just cracking, it's collapsing. Jason Mitchell's final words weren't yelled. They didn't need to be. I saw the person who walked into that house, and the shell of who walked out 3 days later, he added. That's when I knew I couldn't be part of it anymore. When asked why he hadn't come forward sooner, Mitchell's answer was blunt and tragic. Fear. I've seen what happens to people who cross him. I helped make it happen. I wasn't simply a witness. I was part of it. But after I heard the diary had been found, I knew the truth would come out with or without me. And I couldn't live with myself if I stayed silent. With that, Mitchell stepped down. But the atmosphere in the courtroom didn't calm, it surged. The diary was no longer only a devastating document. It had become the hub of a massive web connecting victims, enforcers, and important players across the entertainment sector. But there was one more witness that day. Someone who wouldn't examine events, but the mind behind them. Dr. Eleanor Vasquez, a respected forensic psychologist, took the stand next. Her expertise, understanding behavior through writing. She regarded the journal not only as evidence of crime, but as a mirror into the psychology of the man who wrote it. Her critique of the last entry was terrifying. What we see, Dr. Vasquez testified, is the voice of someone who no longer sees people as human beings, but as assets, liabilities, and pawns in a grand strategy. She highlighted out lines like, "They owe me everything. I created them from nothing. No one gets to walk away." These were not merely expressions of ego, she said. They showed a hazardous worldview. In this thinking, people lived merely to suit the author's goal. Autonomy, consent, personal boundaries. None of it mattered. Only control did. Then the unexpected happened. Sean Combs rose from his seat. "I want to speak," he announced. His voice sharp, breaking the silence. His lead attorney rushed up, clutching his arm, trying to sit him back down. But Diddy shrugged him off. "Your Honor," he began, facing the bench, "I need to address these lies." The judge struck the gavel. "Mr. Combs, you are represented by counsel. This is not the time." "That's not my diary," Diddy insisted. "That's not my handwriting. This is a setup." The judge hammered the gavel again, urging him to sit or be dismissed. But Combs didn't stop. "You don't understand. There are others that want me silenced. Powerful people. This is a conspiracy." At the judge's direction, the jury was promptly whisked out of the courtroom. Then the judge addressed the defendant directly. "This outburst is unacceptable. You are represented by qualified attorneys. You may testify in due time." His lawyer wanted a recess. The judge permitted it. 30 minutes, when court resumed, the atmosphere had transformed. Gone was the bravado. Gone was the posture. Diddy sat slumped, mute beside his legal team, his eyes lifeless. The man previously known for commanding attention now seemed like he wanted to hide. Then his attorney said the words that verified what everyone suspected. "Your Honor, in light of today's evidence, we respectfully request an adjournment to discuss potential resolution options with the prosecution." The meaning was clear. They were willing to negotiate a plea, but the prosecution stayed firm. Given the severity of the crimes and the defendant's attempts to manipulate witnesses even from within these proceedings, we are not entertaining a plea deal at this time. We will proceed with full prosecution.